Evening Blaster peeps. Been trying to encourage you guys to post up on our community page in regards to any information or tech tips that you guys are chasing. So, please go ahead, feel free to post up any comments, any requests, and I'll try my best to go through them and create some videos and how-tos and guides and just try pass on as much knowledge as I possibly can. If I can do it through these live feeds, then hopefully I can reach a lot more of the community. Gives you guys a reference to rather than sort of guessing and or getting a lot of mixed reports. But by all means, what I'm about to go through tonight are things that I've worked out, what works for me. I'm sure there's a lot of techs out there that have got their own ways of doing things. There's no really 100% way of how everything is put together. This is just a quick rundown of a lot of things that I've come across, why I use components that I do use. I'll try and explain as we go along why I use these components. Hopefully it makes a lot of sense. If you believe that there are better components out there, or you've come across better combination of components, and by all means comment away. I'm more than happy to have an open discussion with you guys. We do try and encourage everyone to communicate with everybody in a healthy manner. So to spread as much information as we possibly can. We'll help everybody out. It'll progress this industry, progress this hobby. So let's get to it. So I had a few people, and I've noticed a lot of posts online that people are querying which components work with what. So let's talk about air seal. One of the most important aspects of building a blaster. It's what we're all, if we can utilize as much air as possible in the system of these blasters, then you'll come across and your blasters will become more efficient. You'll be able to use lower rated springs to create more FPS. So let's go through some of these components, and I'll show you the differences between some of the major, common blasters that are out there, and we'll go from there. So thanks for joining us, guys. What's happening, Alfred? Liam, what's happening, brother? How's that 13-1 coming along? Get it back out of the box, man. Let's get that thing singing. Mike, what's happening, man? Chris. Alright, thanks for joining us. So let's start this little info. What we've got starting from left to right. So I've got a lot of J9 components. It's your Gen 9 T-piece, that's your J10 T-piece. Got your cylinder heads, we got your nozzles and cylinder heads, got your cylinders there. Then we move over to a single piece. This is a single cylinder head and cylinder piece. I utilize that in the V2 with the 6mm AEG nozzle. This is my favorite cylinder head. I'll explain why in a minute. It's a Wells cylinder head and nozzle. And we go over to the V2 style or AEG 6mm nozzle cylinder head. That's your Fighting Bro alloy T-piece. I really love that. I try to utilize this as much as I possibly can. Then we go over to the Vector. So that's your Vector standard piston and piston head. That's a Vector nozzle. I'll run through a couple differences why you need to utilize that specific nozzle. There's your stock Vector cylinder and cylinder head, stock T-piece, and I'll tell you why I like using the stock T-piece as opposed to using an alloy one or the black one. So we'll start off with all the Gen 9 components, and we'll start off with some of the differences. So Gen 9 runs an 8mm nozzle as opposed to the 6mm nozzle out of the AEG style. So you can see two different sizes. So clearly you can't interchange the nozzles. You can interchange heads in between the cylinders, but there's a lot of other components that you need to change with it, i.e. tappet plate. Because it is a larger outside diameter, you need to change to a Gen 9 tappet plate or a V2 AEG style tappet plate to utilize that. So one of the questions one of the guys hit me up today is, I always say when people have got low FPS, you need to check your air seal. And a lot of people, they know how to check compression, but that's about as far as they go. So there are a few other aspects that you need to have a look at, and you need to make sure 100% to ensure that your air seal is as close to 100% as possible. Sorry guys. So how people go around about checking compression, it's pretty straightforward. You just block the nozzle, apply downward pressure on the piston, and if it's really hard to compress, then you've got good compression. And this is leaking out of a little bit, it's leaking out of the rubber nozzle a little bit. I normally take that out and glue that down to make a better seal. We'll try that with the AEG style. So that's a bit better. There we go. So we've got nice compression there. What you also need to double check is you don't create suction. So on the return stroke, you don't create suction. If you do create suction, then you run the chance of sucking the gel in through the nozzle and into the cylinder, and then they get confettied, so they go to mush. And then on the compression stroke, when it pushes the air back out, you just got gel ball particles. So you need to double check that. That's relatively easy. Go through that again, pop that back in. There we go. So that's your compression stroke. Just make sure it holds the pressure, and then just keep your finger on there and just see if there's any resistance on the piston. That'll check to see if there's any suction. So that's nice and smooth. Now the reason why I like using the 6 big hole piston head as opposed to that one there, which is your 8 small hole piston head, there are a few other different designs, is because of how this seal operates in the cylinder. So as the piston retracts back, it allows air to bypass through this O-ring and out through these holes, so as to not create vacuum. And then how it creates compression, or a seal to create compression, is as the air pushes through into those holes, it actually expands that O-ring. That O-ring seals up against the cylinder, and that's how we're able to create a seal. So it's very important that you do have the correct size O-ring. As everybody knows, I'm a fan of the brown O-rings. That one there, I've got a couple. Let's go through a few of them. So I've got a couple examples here. These are 2 different brown O-rings. We've got the black O-ring and the green O-ring. Not a fan of the green O-ring. I don't have a red O-ring because I don't use the red O-rings. The reason why I'm not a fan of the green O-rings is that it doesn't handle the heat that well, and it actually swells up, and eventually they do break, and they split, they get jammed in the cylinder, and they stop creating a seal. I do like using the black O-rings in some builds. Find that it's a little bit more reliable, and sometimes the brown O-ring just works too well in some of the builds, so I do revert back to the black O-ring, but I always try the brown O-rings first. The main difference between the 2 different brown O-rings that are out there is inside diameter. So it's only, if you've got a good eye, you can just see the one on the right is a tad bit bigger on the inside diameter. Sorry, just muting all my comments here. People are just blowing my phone up. So the one on the right is just a tad bit bigger in the inside diameter, which helps in regards to the air going through, the air passing through the back and not creating suction. This works with a lot of the cylinder heads. I find that there are certain cylinder heads that doesn't like this brown O-ring but love this brown O-ring, so I do try to utilize this brown O-ring a lot more often than not. And like I said, if it creates a little bit too much suction, then I do just revert back to the black O-ring, give it a bit of stretch, and away we go. Yep, Alfred's your man if you want to get some O-rings. I've got a lot of O-rings from him in regards to O-rings for nozzles and cylinder heads and pistons and that, but we'll run through all of that through this whole little, I suppose you can call it a lecture, little live feed as to why I use some of these components as well. So I like using cylinder heads with double O-rings. I feel that if you can double your chance of increasing that seal, then why the hell not? So I always upgrade my cylinder heads. So hit Alfred up if you want some brown O-rings, man. PM him. He'll be able to sort you out. He's the brown O-ring man. So I do like using cylinder heads with double O-rings because anything that is going to help us get closer and closer to 100% air seal is a must, in my opinion. If you have an option of going a single O-ring or a double O-ring, by all means go a double O-ring. So got that one there. Got a few different styles of Gen 9 cylinder heads that I've used in the past. This is one that I always use. I've trialed this little one here, but no longer can get. It's got a really good seal on that nozzle, but I do find that because of that seal is really good, it creates a lot of friction. If you could try, I'll explain in another video why friction is bad in this type of setup. We do want to decrease the resistance through our system as much as possible. If less resistance means less strain, less strain means your blaster will work more efficiently. You'll get better numbers with using less force, and that's what we're always chasing, trying to chase an efficient build. So I don't necessarily use, or I don't use this anymore, but it had a great seal in the nozzle. As you can see, it's really hard for me to retract and reset that nozzle. So that's your Gen 9. So that's a 8mm nozzle, 8mm cylinder head, double O-ring, as you can see. And now the cylinders, a lot of people want to know what you can interchange. So Gen 9 and the V2 AEG cylinders, I interchange those two. The only ones that you have to be careful about is the Wells. The Wells cylinder is just slightly shorter, so we just machine that cylinder down. So I always buy the V2 version and then just cut them down to length as I need them. So I've gone through that. This is your AEG 6mm nozzle. As you can see, it's the same cylinder as your Gen 9. Still utilize the double O-ring on the cylinder head. And in all my nozzles, if I can, I will see if we can get a good one. Do I have it? Here we go. See, get some light, shine some light on this situation. Where is it? If we can see, oh, not that one. Where is it? Oh, might be able to see better in a Gen 9. There we go. That's a double O-ring. So another good thing to try and do is get a double O-ring nozzle. So that's a double O-ring nozzle in the Gen 9. This one in the AEG sadly is just a single O-ring. And I do have a couple nozzles there that I'm R&Ding that do have a double O-ring. The only downside about it is that they're just a little bit shorter in length. So I'm just trying to work out how to utilize these rubber nozzles on them so that I can use them in my builds. So that's your 6mm AEG cylinder head and nozzle. That's your 6mm single piece cylinder and cylinder head. As you can see, it's one piece, it's one machined piece, so that absolutely takes out the possibilities of there's an air leak between the cylinder and cylinder head. I use these in all my high-end builds because it's just one less thing we have to worry about. So I can't think of anything better than a one single piece. There is a little bit of modifications needed to drop them into some certain gearboxes. People, well, you do have to machine out that hole there just so it drops into the posts in the gearbox, And also I find that sometimes in some gearboxes the posts are a little bit forward, so if they're center to that, you only have to drill it out 4mm. If the posts are slightly forward, you do have to drill it out to 5mm. I've had to do that a couple times, but I've utilized that, and this is my preferred cylinder and cylinder head combo because of the one piece, because it just takes out that opportunity for air to leak out past those seals. Then what do we got? The Fighting Bro T-piece. Like I said, I do try and utilize this T-piece as much as possible. They're no longer available. I do believe Fighting Bro have discontinued them, but there is word on the grapevine that some people may be able to get their hands on it, so I went out and bought as many as I possibly could. So I was lucky enough to have a few of these laying around. And I use these in the retro arms builds, APS box builds, pretty much a V2 receiver style builds. You do have to modify the feed tube in regards to if you want to run a Gen 8 or a or a Wells style mag. You do have to modify that. Well, I don't modify the T-piece, I modify the gearbox, but in the retro arms you do have to widen it a bit, same with the APS. And then just got to work out depth and how much travel the nozzle goes down and seals up against that sealing surface down inside through here, which is just a tappet plate adjustment, which we can go through another time. Vector. So the Vector is just a little bit different of an animal. So this is your stock Vector cylinder and cylinder head. I do utilize the Vector cylinder head. I haven't come across an aftermarket cylinder head. I suppose you can call it aftermarket. So a bit of my mechanical terminology coming through. If there was, oh, there we go, a Vector cylinder head with a double O-ring, once again, I'd be all over it. I do believe in giving you as best chance as possible to obtain that 100% air seal. So when I do Vector builds, I do utilize the stock cylinder head. I do change the cylinder itself, so that's a ported cylinder. Look, using ported cylinders, I can see an advantage in regards to if you're short stroking your blaster. So short stroking, it's a quick rundown of what it is a full stroke blaster will pull the piston out all the way up until it goes to the last tooth, which should theoretically be about there, and then you're utilizing the full capacity of that cylinder. So if you're running a full stroke blaster, the first thing I would do is put a full non-ported cylinder in there. You'll gain that much extra air, and more air calculates to more FPS. The only reason I'd see using a ported cylinder is if you short stroke, so the travel of the piston would only go to about there. So you would short stroke 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, almost 6 teeth. So a cylinder like this I'd utilize in my DSG, so because we don't need that air, that volume in the back of the cylinder, because the piston's not going past that. So first thing I would do if I was using a full stroke is change that to a non-ported cylinder, utilize the cylinder head, change out piston and piston head for one of them bad boys, and you just got to modify and just chop a little bit off the back of that piston just to mimic that profile. So that's the system that I would run in all the Vectors. One of those cylinders, this cylinder head, that piston and piston head combo. Now for the nozzle of the Vector. A lot of people, when they do their Vector builds, they message me and they're like, oh, my FPS is way down, maybe even worse than stock. So with that said, I always tell them to go and double check their air seal. The most common place to lose compressed air is between the nozzle and the T-piece. I find that utilizing the standard T-piece is the best product out there. Don't change to an alloy T-piece, don't change to the black T-piece, just utilize the orange T-piece. Now, the reason why I do that is I've sort of had a look at the black one and the alloy one and the profile of the sealing surface. So that surface in there, that little ridge, is different. The orange one mimics that profile there, whereas so it has a lot shallower chamfer, so it mimics that sealing surface, which it mimics that angle, which increases your sealing surface, so it will give you a better chance of creating that seal. Whereas with the alloy ones and the black ones, I find that they're a little bit more square and it will minimize your sealing surface. So instead of utilizing that whole area there to seal, you're only really utilizing a little bit at the front here, and that is so much harder to create a seal with, I'd say almost 50% less surface area. So you'd have to do you have to modify a lot more components to get that pressure up against that nozzle head to create a seal. So stick with the orange one, guys. Don't go out and buy an alloy one. Don't go out and buy a black one. That's what I've found. I always use the orange T-pieces in every single one of my builds. I do run a little bit of glue along that seam there just to help it stay together, and just to ensure that there is no way that any air is going to bypass out of there, even though the sealing surface is just forward of that crack. It's just a little OCD peace of mind thing that I like to do. Also, don't go out and use the Gen 9 nozzle. So a lot of people have been caught out in regards to length. As you can see, we're only talking probably a mil, if that. But in regards to air seal, that's all you need to create an air leak. So I hope you guys can see that. There is a slight height difference. If you go out and use a Gen 9 nozzle, you will have sealing issues to no end. Go out and grab one of those blue nozzles specifically made for the Vector. I got this one from VAS. Yeah, 1 mil is all the difference, Liam, and that's all it needs. And that can create you so many headaches, and people will chase their tail and you'll probably go crazy or drive you up the wall. So these little nozzles I got from X-Force, VAS over at X-Force. So you can go check them out if you guys are looking at modding your Vector. I highly recommend those nozzles. What else are we going through? Alright, so we've gone through some of the components. We've gone through what components I do like. I do also like to, if I can, utilize stock T-pieces. So that's a J10 T-piece. That's a 3D printed J10 T-piece from GBA. That's just your stock T-piece. Got photogenic. Yeah, I found that out the hard way too, brother. I chased my tail around for quite a while until I worked out that there's actually 3 different sizes. There's one where the J9 and the Vector are only 1 mil difference, and then there's another 8 mil nozzle which is significantly shorter again. So don't get caught out, guys. Just keep your wits to yourself. Make sure you get the correct part, even if you bring your stock part in, and just put it up next to it and just make sure that they're the same length. Or even if this is just slightly longer, that's great. It will just mean that there's more pressure to seal up against it. So yeah, J9 T-piece, J10 T-piece, they're just slightly, there we go. As you can see, the feed tube is mirror image of each other, so be careful about that as well, guys. And even though I did say I like to use the stock T-pieces as much as possible, I do use the Fighting Bro T-pieces when we start changing up a lot of things, i.e. if someone comes in with a retro box, APS box, and then they get another aftermarket receiver, and they got little bits and pieces here, there and everywhere, so we're sort of making a blaster from different components. I find that this works well when you're trying to marry up a few different manufacturers' components together. Now, I've shown you how to check compression. I've shown you guys how to be careful and just watch out for the vac on the return stroke. And now I will show you how to check all three components together. So let's get, how about we get something like this, just make sure I can, no, that's a bit big. Where are we? If we can create something here, oh yeah, there. Should have been a little bit more prepared for this one. Actually, we can do it with a vector. Oops, sorry, just getting out a camera shot here. I'll set this all up. So, boop. So effectively, this is what in the vector gearbox it would look like with all three components together. So we've got your, want to check that there's no air leak coming between the inner barrel and the T-piece. Want to make sure that there's no air leak coming between the sealing surface of the T-piece and the nozzle. Want to make sure there's no air leak coming between the nozzle and the cylinder head. Want to make sure there's no air leak coming out of the cylinder head to the cylinder. And we also want to make sure that there's no air leak coming out between the O-ring and the cylinder. So we can test every single one of those components when everything's in the box. You'll put the tappet plate up against that, shorten your tappet plate spring because it'll put more pressure on the nozzle. Once everything is in the box, you put a little bit of pressure up against the back of this piston and you just blow through the inner barrel. So you create pressure through the inner barrel. If you can hear air leaking somewhere, then what I normally do is I start at the feed tube, so I'll just tap it. If the air starts changing and making different sort of tones, then you know you've got an air leak coming out of the feed tube. If you tap that feed tube while there's an air leak and doesn't change in tone, then it's somewhere else. After that, I do play around with the piston a little bit. I might move it back and forth, put a little bit more pressure, take pressure off, and once again, you're just trying to listen for a change of tone. If the change of tone is not there, then you might have an air leak in between cylinder head, your nozzle, or your inner barrel. If that's the case, I usually take these components apart and then I'll test by blowing in through the inner barrel and sealing off those two holes, and if it comes out through here, then I know I've got a bad seal between my inner barrel and T-piece. If this holds pressure, then I know that system is holding compression, it's got a good air seal. So I'll put that off to the side, and then I'll do the same again with this. So I might do a compression, so double check your compression, make sure that it holds, and then I'll double check and blow air through that and just see if I can hear any air leaks coming out of these systems. If I can, then I will start taking components away and retesting. So if I take that away and then blow through that and it holds pressure, then I know my nozzle's the problem. Or if I take your nozzle away, blow through that and I can still hear an air leak, then I'll take the piston away, I'll seal all the holes as possible, and I'll blow through here, and if I don't hear an air leak, then I know it's my O-ring. So it's just a method of deduction, and you do need to do that final step where you have everything in the gearbox the way it is supposed to sit when the air goes through, when the compressed air goes through every single component. So i.e. the tappet plate is attached to the nozzle, you've got the spring attached to the gearbox, so that's the amount of pressure that it's going to hold against that nozzle. There's no use you applying your own pressure, because you may apply more pressure than the return spring on the tappet plate. Then it's not how everything sits in the gearbox. You need to mimic how everything is going to sit originally in the gearbox. Well, if you find that you do have an air leak in between your nozzle and your T-piece, which is a pretty common It's a pretty common problem. You'll always get the air leak coming out through the feed tube. You've got to do one or two things. You've got to either increase the travel of that nozzle, or you've got to increase the pressure on that return spring. So if you increase the pressure on that return spring and it holds that nozzle up against the sealing surface of the T-piece and it stops the air leak, then that's your issue. If you increase the pressure and it's still leaking, it's probably not traveling far enough, and we're only talking like a quarter of a millimeter, 0.25 of a mil, and it'll leak. So, you know, you might have to shave the front of your tappet plate just to get the nozzle to move that little bit more forward. Alright, we're back. Yep, sweet. So, increase the travel of the nozzle by shaving your tappet plate. Increase the pressure on your nozzle by cutting the return spring. What else can go wrong with air seals? Another thing that you might do all of that and everything seems to be perfectly fine. It's got 100% air seal, but for some reason you still are low on FPS. Now you're going to chase your tail and you're going to trying to work out where is this air leak coming from? How can everything be sealed on the bench, but when you put it back together and fire it, it is so low on FPS? So there are a few things that can create that. So that's Tappet timing. That's I don't want to go as far as saying it's an advanced type of tech method, but in regards to Tappet timing, as simple as I can put it, is you want that tappet plate to return to allow the nozzle to seat up against your T-piece before that piston goes on its compression stroke. So when people utilize things like delay chips, then what you're effectively doing is you're slowing down the speed of your nozzle. And if you're using a delay chip and you increase and you start using higher speed gears, then that's detrimental, because that piston is moving so much faster now. You're 16 to 1, 13 to 1s, 12 to 1s. That piston is moving so much faster and you're slowing down the speed of that nozzle. By the time it starts its compression stroke back up through the cylinder, this nozzle isn't sealed up against the T-piece. So you're bleeding compressed air before it actually seals. So get rid of the delay chips. If you're going to run 18 to 1s, you don't really need a delay chip, even with your stock blasters. Like, you really don't. The sooner you can get that nozzle to seal up against the T-piece, the better off you're going to be. Then, you know, you can go hard and go as fast as you possibly can. So that's a little bit of Tappet timing for you. Aim of the game is to get that nozzle to seal up against the T-piece before the compression stroke of the piston. Another thing that you can get is if you start pushing high FPS, you can get what I can best describe it as, I'm going to describe it as nozzle bounce. So what I mean by nozzle bounce is that you, especially when you don't get the right length of your inner barrel. So if you start over pressurizing your inner barrel, then you're going to get so much pressure build up in the inner barrel that it's going to overcome the pressure of the spring, the force on the spring. It's going to overcome the tappet return spring force on the nozzle and will actually push this nozzle back. So, you know, everyone who's trying to chase above 400 FPS and they seem to just plateau at a certain FPS, no matter what type of spring they put in there, no matter how much, how good their air seal is because you have got a great air seal, but you haven't got your inner barrel measured correctly. So you're over pressurizing that barrel. So you're getting a positive pressure through here, which is overcoming the spring pressure on that nozzle. So the air will come through, it will over pressurize your inner barrel, and then it will just crack your nozzle a little bit, and then all of that air comes out through your feed tube. These are things you're not going to be able to mimic on the bench. They're things that you need to watch out for, and there are certain circumstances where this will raise its ugly head. So high FPS, if you find that no matter what type of spring you jam into your blaster, it just plateaus and it doesn't move whatsoever, then look at the nozzle bounce, because you're just over compressing air in your inner barrel. So you can go a longer inner barrel. A lot of people do put aesthetics over function. So, you know, they might have a setup and like, oh no, if I increase my inner barrel length, then I'm going to decrease the looks of the blaster. That's not me. I do chase performance over aesthetic looks. But, you know, another way around it is chopping down the tappet return spring. So you increase the force that tappet return spring pushes up against that nozzle. So watch out for that one. So a little bit of nozzle bounce, and watch out for your tappet timing. So you want that nozzle to seat up against that T-piece before the compression stroke of the piston. What else have I got for you guys? I think those two last ones were just a little bit of an insider tip. Components, utilizing components. Like I said, 8mm nozzle Gen 9, different lengths to the Vector, even though the Vector is an 8mm nozzle. Be careful of that. Wells setup. So Wells is a 7mm. So no, you can't use the AEG style nozzle cylinder head with a Wells. You do have to keep it to a Wells. You can do a little bit of modifying to utilize this cylinder head in a Wells receiver. If you're going to go as far as doing that, I always recommend just change over to a V2. Like the Wells gearbox, especially the plastic one, is no good to start with. So you can only modify that to a certain degree before you're going to crack the front end of it. And then you're going to be stuck with using Wells components. Their word on the grapevine is that there's probably going to be a good Wells gearbox coming out relatively soon, so keep an eye out for that for all you Wells fans. But if someone at the interim messages me and goes, I want to modify a Wells gearbox, I just tell them to go buy a nylon V2 gearbox and just switch over to 6mm AEG internals and be done with it. There's a lot of components for the 6mm AEG. There's a lot of components now for the Gen 9, and we can sort of mix and match those components for the Vector. I'm happy that the Vector's got its own designated nozzle. Yeah, I think that's about all I got for you guys on air seal. Very, very, very important to maintain or go as close as you can to 100% air seal. That is going to be your first point and call if you're down on FPS. So check your air seal. You can check your air seal on the bench by blowing through the inner barrel, and that checks every single component in the system. If that is fine and you still find that you've got really low FPS, then check those other two components. Check for nozzle bounce, and also check for tappet timing. So I'm trying to encourage you guys to start posting up on our page ideas on future videos. So a big shout out to one of our community members who requested that I do this type of video for you guys. So the more information you guys can give me, the more you can post up on our community page, the more I can help you and keep my live feeds relevant. So in the next few days, I'm hopefully going to get my hands on a Gen 8 gearbox, and I'll run you guys through the Gen 8 gearbox basics, run through the components, explain what's the difference between a Gen 8 gearbox, what components you can use, what components you can't use, and yeah. So we'll go through and start doing a little bit back to basics over the next few weeks, just to catch up on everybody, just so that we get all the new people in our community, inform them, and yeah, get more modded blasters out there. As always, guys, got any questions, PM me. Really hope you guys can start using our community page, start talking amongst each other. Hey Brad, yeah, this is Brad. Big shout out to you, brother. Recommended me to make this type of video. So as much as much information as I'd love to give you guys can use this as a point of reference. I'll start seeing if I can track down some of my old videos that I used to do on the AEG, AB, Australian Gel Ball Blaster, yeah, AE, whatever the letters are. And see if I can start posting up those videos on this community page. Tell your mates, like, share, join. More people we can get on this community page talking about blasters and tech in a healthy manner. I always stress, we're trying to create a healthy community here. No question is a stupid question, guys. The only stupid question is a question not answered, not asked. Yeah, everyone's at different levels. Everyone's got different knowledge. Everyone's used different components. If we can all help each other, then we're gonna create a better industry and a better hobby. So yeah, hopefully you guys can start commenting on our page, and I'll start going through the list. LGBTQ. Oh, Alfred. So yeah, I'll try and do as many live feeds as I possibly can. Aftermarket. What's the difference between a standard cylinder to an aftermarket cylinder? Okay, difference between a standard cylinder and aftermarket cylinder is absolutely nothing except for materials used. So that's a standard cylinder in the Vector. That's a brass cylinder. Stainless steel cylinder. Stainless steel cylinder will not wear as much as a brass. But with that said, I do find that the brass cylinder does seal a little bit better than the stainless steel cylinder. Stainless steel cylinder, because it's lovely Chinese made. I wonder if you guys can see inside there. If I can get a good light. Oh, there we go. There are a few imperfections in this cylinder. So they've got machine marks and everything like that. Whereas the brass cylinder, do find it's a little bit better finish, so they do seal a little bit better, but they do wear out a lot quicker. So I always opt for the stainless steel cylinder because I do like to make my blasters more reliable. So if the blaster lasts longer, you're going to enjoy yourself a lot better. The last thing you want to be doing is pulling your blaster down every game. There are a couple of builds that I do that I do recommend they get serviced every weekend, but they're the really high-end builds. They're stuff that we're pushing everything to beyond their limits, so we do need to stay on top of those things. Tappet plate, okay, timing adjustment. Not necessarily that there's timing adjustment. You can adjust the timing, so you can put the sector delay chip in there and reprofile it and adjust when that tappet plate wants to recess back into the T-piece. When the tappet plate, which is obviously attached to the nozzle, how that recesses back into the T-piece. I always try to get this nozzle back into the T-piece sealing surface as quick as I possibly can. The sooner that nozzle's back in there, the more chance you give yourself of utilizing all that compressed air when the piston goes back up onto the compression stroke. What other questions have we got from you guys? Timing adjustment, tappet plate mods. All right, give me a second. I'll go grab a tappet. Oh no, here we got one here. I got a really old. This is my first DSG tappet plate, so this one's really old. This one's got a lot of my little secrets attached to it. I just had a spiel about how I wanna find the same with the brass one. How do you change the pads in the one-piece cylinder or add sorbeline if needed? Oh yeah, feeding issues. Yeah, cool. All right. Look, I'll show you. I'll let you guys in on a few tech tips and secrets and why I do things. And this is my DSG build, so this is the one that, 60 rounds per second. This is like our high-end elite build. So get ready for some little secrets. Alright, so that's a DSG tappet plate. Why do I call it a DSG tappet plate? One of a few reasons. One, the tail is cut. So when you're creating a DSG, and I will do a video a little bit later once I go through all the basics on what my DSG build is, what I did to every single component to ensure that my DSG works and works well. So this is my very first good share. I'm sharing it, Ivan. Okay, I had a little bit of a moral dilemma, but I always say, share your information. If we can share the information that's out there, then yeah, everyone can build effectively a lot better. Everyone's got a great understanding of all the technical aspects. Then we can get a lot more people helping out the community. So here's my little tips and tricks with my DSG, why I do what I do, and why I believe mine is a little bit more effective than some other DSG builds that are out there. So everyone out there that has got a DSG build, by all means, do this to your tappet plate. It'll change your world. So profile on the tappet tail. So everyone's like, how much do I take off your original V2 tappet plate? It is, cut it so that edge there meets, if you guys can imagine that this is a sector gear. It's not, it's a bevel gear, but just imagine it's the sector gear. See how that tappet plate is halfway up the shaft of that, I'm going to call it a sector gear, it's a bevel gear, up the shaft of the sector gear. Now why do we do that is because, like I said, we, dare you do a vector with a one piece? Somehow, go away. Sorry, I've just got some, I got Nordic AEG messaging me, he's spamming me while I'm doing this live feed. Work on GBB. Look, I'll go through this first and then we'll have a quick chat about gas blowback systems, hey? Yeah, so let's go through this and then we'll touch base with gas blowback systems. So, aim of the game in regards to tappet timing is to get that nozzle seated as quickly back into the T-piece as possible. And how you adjust, another way you can adjust the tappet timing is by adjusting the length of that tail. So the longer the tail, the more time it will take for the tappet to recess back. So in a DSG, we want this tappet plate to go we want it to go back to be able to feed, but then go as far to go back to its resting position as quick as possible. And by chopping the tail so it meets halfway through that shaft, that is as quick as it's ever going to get. Now on the DSG sector gear, there's two posts. So if you can imagine one post here and one post there, by the time this rolls back and that post goes past the bottom of that tappet plate, if one post is here and we've got the tappet plate at its full retraction, so it's fed a gel, and we've got one post here, the next post to feed the next gel is there. So we really have no time whatsoever to recess this nozzle tappet plate back to its original position, which is sealing the nozzle, before the next post comes to pick it back up to feed the next gel. So we need to get this tappet plate moving we need to get this tappet plate moving forward as quick as possible, because by the time this post is let go, we've got the next post on the sector gear ready to pick it back up. How you can also utilize getting the tappet plate speed really quick is heavy duty tappet plate return spring. There are a lot of different ones out there. Sorry Sal, I thought you were talking about gas blowback systems. Alright, so gel ball blasters, sweet, no worries. I'll touch on that after I go through this what I modify on my DSG tappet plate. Actually, I really wish I picked up a different one now. But Ivan, listen, this is for you, brother. Oh, and anyone else who wants to build a DSG. So getting this tappet plate to go back to its resting position as quick as possible, because we have 2 pickup posts, and that pickup post, by the time the first pickup post, by the time it lets go of the Tappet plate, the second pickup post is right there. As a lot of you know, your standard sort of a 9-to-1 DSG is effectively a 18-to-1 gear set with a DSG gear on the sector gear. I have made a 6-to-1 DSG gear set, so well, mine moves quicker. It's a faster gear set, so for me to get this Tappet plate moving as quick as it possibly can is important, and I've got it feeding perfectly. I've got no feeding issues. So cut the bottom of the tail off halfway up the post, the shaft, and that's as quick as you're going to get this Tappet plate to move. To increase the speed, heavy duty return spring, and then cut off 4 coils. So I do 2 coils each side, and then that's perfect for me. Also, what I do to increase the speed of this Tappet plate is I lighten it. So I shave all of the inside here. I haven't done it on this one. This was DSG Tappet plate 101. So I shave and gut out all of the inside here in my DSG Tappet plates now, just to make it as light as possible, so that by the time that post releases this Tappet plate, it just moves as quick as possibly can to get it back to the front. Another feeding issue that you guys might be having in regards to your Tappet plates, if you notice, how deep do you push your twin O-ring cylinder head on the cylinder? Oh, okay, yep, sweet. All right, let me get through this. Then I'll get to the delay chip. Then I'll get to the cylinder head position. I did touch base on the cylinder head position in my Back to Basics in the Gen 9, but I've got you guys' attention, so I'll go through and do it again tonight. It was just a quick... No worries, Ivan. So that is feeding, i.e. Tappet plate moves back and it feeds the gel up inside there, and then we want to get this Tappet plate to move as far as we want to get this Tappet plate to move forward as quick as possible. Another thing is the nozzle travel. So we also need a certain amount of travel out of our nozzle to ensure that the gel can be fed. So, and we need it to travel as far forward as possible to seal up against the T-piece. How we get extra travel forward is by shaving the front of that Tappet plate. So I take about 0.5 of a mil off the front of my Tappet plates, and that ensures that that nozzle travels forward enough to seal up against the sealing surface on that T-piece. So you can see how thin that is. That's about as far as I would possibly go. I have also worked out through a lot of trial and error that you can't shave the complete front of that Tappet plate because it becomes too thin and it creates flex. And if it creates flex, then what ends up happening is nozzle and Tappet plate are moving that fast, back and forth, you get deflection, and this nozzle will actually pop off and rip itself out of the front of the Tappet plate. So you can see how I've got a little bit of a ridge around the front of my Tappet plate. That stops that from happening. And how I get that ridge is I drop my nozzle inside my Tappet plate and I just scribe a little guideline around the bottom edge, and I just go around and file it back and take off 0.5 mil from the front of the Tappet plate. I do like taking just a little bit more off the bottom because that does create a little bit of flex like that. And the reason why I like it to create a bit of flex is because as the Tappet plate moves up and down, it actually doesn't travel true. The nozzle will move very, very slightly, and if you start pulling, or if you got your gearbox there, have an actual close look. It actually drops just a little bit like that. So I used to glue my nozzles to my tappet plates. I don't do that anymore, because what will end up happening is that it'll end up bending the little nozzle on your cylinder head, because it does want to move. You got to allow that to just shift a little bit. It just doesn't run true, and because of that little bit of movement, I also compensate that with a little bit of deflection on the tappet plate. And as it goes to seal, it actually, see how that tappet plate deflects? It then allows the nozzle to run true in the T-piece. So the imperfections in Chinese quality control is taken up by the deflection in the tappet plate. So that took me a long time to wrap my head around and work that out. What else have we got? So Ivan, that's your feed. That should solve your feeding issues. That should solve your sealing issues. You know, lighten your tappet plate as much as you can. Cut the bottom off of your DSG. Increase the heavy duty spring and then cut 4 coils off it to increase the speed of the tappet plate. And yeah, that should be you, brother. I can't believe you got that info out of me tonight. That is months and months of me pulling my hair out and dropping thousands of dollars on components to work that out. Oh, as you can see, this is probably one of my first original DSG builds at the bottom here, and half the reason why I don't glue my nozzles onto my tappet plates anymore, because it just doesn't run true, and it just wore the shit out of the bottom of that. I've had a couple where they've actually broken that little snout on their cylinder head. So yeah, so don't do it. What did we have? We had someone solves my life. My pain is your pleasure, Ivan. Sector delay chips. So I don't like sector delay chips. I'll sleep well tonight. Sector delay chips, I believe, are for slow ass blasters. Even the stock blaster, I wouldn't utilize a sector delay chip. That's one of the first things I'd take out. You can use sector delay chips to your advantage. If you shave off the back end of the sector delay chip, then that'll increase your speed of your tappet plate. I don't even have a sector delay chip here to show you guys. I really don't. What have we got? We've got a gear set here that I might be able to quickly show you why. Here we go. So that's your SSG single sector gear. So the delay chip makes that pickup post a lot bigger. So the advantage, what I do like about the sector delay chip, is that as the sector gear rotates around, it actually picks up that tappet plate a lot sooner. So by picking up that tappet plate a lot sooner, you're going to give yourself, and it moves the tappet plate back a lot further, you're going to give yourself enough chance to feed a gel up into the chamber, up into the breech. And by doing that, then you're going to stop a lot of your feeding issues. Now, what I don't like about the sector delay chip is the back half of it. So the advantages of it picking up the tappet plate sooner, advantages of moving it the tappet plate further, it also delays the return of that tappet plate. So if you imagine that the sector delay chip was here, it'll just hold and pause the tappet plate, and it doesn't need to. Like, it really doesn't. So the only aim of the game to move the tappet plate back is just to get that gel ball into the breech. Once that gel ball's in the breech, that's it. It's done its job. Get that tappet plate back forward and sealing. So, you know, I've utilized an idea which was forwarded to me by Nordic AEG, where get the sector delay chip, use the advantages of it. So picking up the tappet plate sooner, pushing the tappet plate back further, and then just grind off the back half of it. And then, so you get pretty much best of both worlds. So by the time it passes, then tappet plate is on its return stroke, and it's up against that sealing surface quicker, and then the sector gear just rotates and does its thing. And then once again, about there, it'll pick up the tappet plate and then start moving it back. You just don't want it to pause at the back. There's no use for this tappet plate to be pausing at the back of it. Get it forward as quick as you can. So that's my that benefit on 16. Yes, yeah, it'll benefit on a stock blaster. Like, you get a Wells blaster 18-1, rip the sector delay chip out. It shouldn't really need a sector delay chip. Now, for all you guys that are out there ripping their Wells apart right now and ripping the sector delay chip out, hold up 1 second. The tappet plate is designed to have that sector delay chip in there. So the profile of the tappet plate will, if you just rip the sector delay chip out and you now shorten that post, go away. The profile of that tappet plate requires that extra surface area the sector delay chip has to move this back far enough. So don't go ripping it out and then putting it back together, because you're going to message me tomorrow and go, what the actual fuck? It's worse than ever before. I've got feeding issues, I've got sealing issues, I've got everything issues. If you're going to rip out your sector delay chip, go out and buy a brand new tappet plate and swap it, because the profile on the tail is designed to have that sector delay chip on the sector gear. What else? What other comments we got happening there? I've been tempted to ask you for a while now. Just ask, brother. You're Ivan. Just ask. You're not going to be in any worse position than you are before you ask a question. I'm not going to sit there and, like I said, the only dumb question is a question not asked. In my opinion, I'm not going to badger anyone. I'm going to forward as much information as I possibly can. It is a battle between all my time, effort, and money spent in doing all of this tech, and giving up information. I do like people to take the journey. You're never going to learn if someone just hands you an answer. You're not going to respect or value that answer if someone just gives it to you. I will always guide you guys in the right direction. Don't take offense if I don't give you the answer straight away. I thoroughly encourage you guys to take the journey. I thoroughly encourage you guys to rip your blasters apart, get it in a million pieces, tear your hair out, have a bit of a cry, but get gel balls deep. Seriously, just get in there, get your hands dirty, and if you can show that you've done that and it's still over your head, then hit me up. And I'll guide you along the way. And if it gets to the point where you're going to neck yourself because you can't work it out, then I'll give you the answer. But yeah, never feel like you shouldn't ask a question. Well, in my respect, anyway. What other questions have we got going here? Adam, what's happening, brother? I'll have no. Oh man, what do we got? There was another question. Oh, that's right. How deep do you push the twin O-ring cylinder head into the cylinder? So you are going to be limited. I don't have a gearbox. Oh yeah, I do. Here we go. So that's a Gen 9 gearbox. It has posts. You can sort of see the casting marks here, little bump right there. And you're going to line those up with those little holes there. So you're going to be limited to how the cylinder drops inside. You want to line the cylinder up in there, and you want to line the posts up with those holes. So that'll determine how deep you go into that cylinder head. So I normally start with, let's see if I can show you cylinder head here. There's that little line. So you got to hold up, see if I can, there we go. You got that little ridge. As you can see, I've just got that ridge just sticking up a little bit. So that's where I start. And then I drop it into the gearbox, and then I adjust the depth of that cylinder until Those posts line up with the cylinder head, and the corners of that cylinder line up with the cutout on the gearbox. So that is your perfect alignment. And that's how you can determine how far you put your cylinder head into your cylinder. That one there, that box looks familiar. Where, I bet you that's O-rings are great for fitting in the barrel of a Vector. I'm ready for gluing in. Those little O-rings, yep, sweet. It's been a long journey and about 7 Tappet plates in. Oh man, 7. God. Try like over 20. Ivan, I've modified Tappet plates. I've shaved them down. I've broken them. I've snapped them. I've done all different weird and wonderful things, just to try and work out how to get this to work. So, yeah, look, if you're 7 Tappet plates in, man, you're worthy of the answers. But sector delay chips don't move your Tappet plate back any further, bro. They only move your Tappet earlier and close later depending on shape. Yeah, no. I empathize with what you're saying, Kita, but how I referenced that was if you use the stock Tappet plate, then yeah, it's not going to move the Tappet plate any further back. But I utilized the idea from Nordic AEG. I used a stock V2 Tappet plate, and I used a sector delay chip. So the stock V2 Tappet plate wasn't designed to run the sector delay chip, and that's how I got it to move the Tappet plate back a little bit further, because I was having issues with one of my builds that the Tappet plate wasn't recessing 100%. It was probably off by 0.5 mil, and I spent days trying to work out how the hell I'm going to get this Tappet plate to move back far enough, and I couldn't. And it was the first time I ever come across it. So I was just talking to one of Nordic AEG about it, and he turned around and said, use a sector delay chip, and I laughed at him. I did. And he sort of looked at me and he goes, no, honestly, think about it. And so I did. And I was just like, oh, fuck, of course. Because I'm making that pickup post thicker, it'll pick up and make the stock V2 Tappet plate move back that little bit more further, which solved my issue. Buy another 30. Yeah, I saved you a bit of coin there, Ivan. What do we got? All right, guys. I think I've gone through all the questions. Yeah, fair call, bro. Yeah, exactly. Hybrids, man. Bitzers. You pick a good gearbox. You pick the receiver that you like. There's some people pick different styles of T-pieces, and you got to monster these things together. And so many people come up with so many combinations, and not only that, because they're Chinese made, the quality control's not that great. So that's where I came into the issue of I'm 0.5 mil off. Maybe it wasn't even that, and I didn't want to shorten the nozzle, because the second I shorten the nozzle or move the rubber tip on the nozzle back, I disrupt my air seal on the T-piece. And I was, just scratching my head. I was banging my head up against the wall and working out how the hell I'm going to get this Tappet plate to move back that extra 0.5 mil. So yeah, big shout out to Nordic AEG. Put me on the right track. And that's just a little trick that now I keep in my pocket. So next time I come across something like that, I know straight away, sweet, I'll just go and get a sector delay chip. I'll shave down the back half of it so it doesn't pause at the end of its travel, and it'll move. It'll get me to move that Tappet plate back an extra 0.5 mil, 1/4 mil, whatever it is I need to get it to feed properly. All right, guys. Good. Thanks, Brian. What's happening, man? Glad you checked in. Like I said, guys, any questions, just post them up on our community page. And available inside, man. I'm sure a lot of people will greatly appreciate and benefit from. See you tomorrow. Yep, I'll catch you tomorrow, Alfred. I'll get your blaster back to you. The problem with your blaster, Alfred, is the battery. The battery was flat as a tack. So I got it charging now. I also had a look at it. I think there's a little bit of a modification that I want to do with the gearbox that will help it operate a lot more smoothly, a lot more efficiently, create a little less drag on this component, which we should get higher FPS and greater rate of fire just using, you know, your normal springs, man. Yes, triple chilled latte, no ice. Just give me a triple cold latte, brother, and I'm a happy man. Alright, thanks guys. Keep in touch. Post up on our community page. If you think I've got something wrong, by all means, comment. More than happy to have a discussion with you guys. You know, and we'll just bounce ideas off each other. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Brett. You're too kind, dear sir. Like I said, I'll start posting up a lot more live feeds. Give me some info, guys. Let me know what you want to know. I'll pass on as much information as possible. You know, and you know, if Ivan jumps back online, I'm sure he'll be able to get a lot more secret squirrel tech tips out of me. So yeah, keep them coming, guys. Stay tuned, and once again, thank you very much.